Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today, we are thinking about why the world is going insane. Goodness, this is a great question because we really feel it. We all feel it. And thankfully, I have my special guest here, Howard, who's going to help us really think about this in another way to really shine some light because we all are really going through it together. So, Howard, when you hear the words, why the world is going insane, what does that really make you think about?
Well, I have a number of different, background qualifications and experiences, beneath those. One of them is as a doctor, a medical doctor, and in psychotherapy, specifically in the
Okay.
field of psychiatry. So, on one level, when I see mass irrational behavior from my psychiatric training,
Uh-huh.
that's crazy. Um,
Yeah.
the issue, though, is why are we experiencing so much more of it now and at an accelerating rate? And I think fundamentally, we've become overly distracted by the outside world in various ways. And
Hmm.
we're not as connected to our intuition, to our heart, nor do we connect to other people the way we once did, heart to heart,
That
so to speak. And
is
the
powerful.
accelerator that is making us even more distracted and more divisive in that distraction is the IT technology. And particularly now with AI so rapidly integrating and upgrading everything, so it becomes almost essential, even if you don't personally, for example, value or believe it, to keep up with other people. You sort of have to still sort of do it.
Mm-hmm.
We know that even just a smartphone use is addictive. And I mean that psychologically and physiologically, the so-called dopamine hits. It's
Yeah.
not theory. And by the way, it's not an accident. It's not a side effect. It was designed that way
Mm.
because the more time we spend on those devices, the more, again, we're monetizing the people who rake it in, literally.
True. That's very true. That's a very valid point because people don't realize that how distraction can really cause us to refocus our perspective. And that's one thing it's funny that you say technology because that's one thing that I'm trying to wean myself off with is
It's about
technology
balance.
more.
I
Yeah,
don't
to
think it's
get
like
that
bad in
balance.
itself, balance.
No,
Yeah.
no, because there's always goodness. It just
Hmm.
comes bad when there's those extremes. You know what I mean? We
Yes,
always have
exactly.
those
Yeah.
extremes. And I had a guest on my show, and she explained it like a pendulum,
Hmm.
and it's hard to stop the pendulum to stop right in the middle to find that balance. And I
Hmm.
that sticks with me for
Yes.
everything in life.
It's
Literally,
all
like
about
that's
balance. Yes. Right.
it's like engraved in my mind after I had that conversation with her.
Yeah.
So now it's like every time I have an emotion, I'm always asking myself, is it extreme? And what side of of the extremity is it at? Because sometimes we go through those, and especially in thoughts. And I love the fact that you have this psychiatry background. So you know the difference between someone just acting out of character
Hmm.
for the moment versus somebody acting out of character for who they are as an individual and a human being.
Exactly.
And in this world, people don't know how to identify the difference and they confuse the two, I noticed. Have you noticed that as well?
Yes, and particularly it is, of concern with what you're facing in your country right now in the United States in just the next few months. There's extreme divisiveness, but it's not just divisiveness of disagreement on policies, for example. It's visceral. It's like hatred and almost a desire to take out, to eliminate some of the
Yeah.
opposition who are seen as, the bad guys. And each side thinks the other is the bad guys. This was a united country. This was a beacon for the whole world about democracy, about the possibility of peoples from totally different backgrounds to come together and forge something greater and beautiful. And so quickly that is being lost. And many people, I don't think, are aware of the degree of the risk. It's not just about an upcoming election. But I don't also want to just, put it in the political realm. Back to, again, my background in psychiatry. I'm concerned for the world right now.
Yeah.
For example, another example, divisiveness. The UK broke out of the European Union, in their sense of divisiveness. Um, in my book that I wrote recently, the one Dreamer to Do It, this one here,
Yeah, I see it in
um,
the back corner,
I
angled.
from my research, I tried to explain to people to wake them up to the reality that we're like amphibious beings, as strange as that may sound to you. Amphibians, like frogs and salamanders, can live in two different environments, water and land. We're amphibious beings, and we can live on this level of reality where we see ourselves somewhat as separate from others and the physical world around us. But
Mhm.
there's another level that we also can access once we know how to, deeper level, where we're all connected, all of us, and even
Mhm.
connected to everything in terms of also nature and the so-called inanimate world as well. And
Yeah.
again, humanity has lost sight of that. The early religions and the older indigenous teachings knew that as an inherent and experiential wisdom. It wasn't just they were taught to believe it to honor, the elders, or because historically it had been passed along for so long. It was the live experience.
Yeah.
A-
That's very
And
true.
so we're losing that. We're losing that, awareness of that deeper inner dimension that actually is the opposite, connects us all, and is also where we have a greater source of wisdom and intuition. And
Yeah.
coming back a little more conventionally, because I can go all over the place with this.
No,
Um,
you're fine. You're
it-
actually right on line. I'm keeping up with you, so you're
okay,
good.
so people have literally lost the ability to think. I know that's
Mhm.
powerful, and I mean it sadly.
No, you're
They they
absolutely right.
they're
That's why I have this show.
they're either I know they're either like checked out, all right, because it's overwhelmed, or too much confusion of the mixed messaging, um, or they're overly reliant on some particular influence leader or data feed, for how they see the world and how they be in the world. But the ability to think things out for themselves is increasingly being lost. We're losing so many skills. I mean, even for example, when we text communication, it's one thing, back to balance. If you
Yeah.
text someone to say, I'll be back at 3 o'clock or something, some message, or leave it by the front door, I'm out for a while, that's okay.
Yeah.
It could be helpful. It's not particularly, taking us away from the deeper reality. But when you see people having an interactive live text conversation with each other, so it's ongoing, and they're just texting
Hmm.
back and forth, and by definition, they're doing it with a phone, but they're
Hmm.
not using the phone because they think it's enough just to text. Now, when you text, partly in terms of things we're losing, many people don't bother with spelling or grammar anymore, abbreviations, speed, you don't care. They'll understand it anyway. But we're also losing that as an ability when we need to be able, perhaps, to spell things properly, to put
Yeah.
things in a more, logical sequence. In addition, when you're relying on text, you're relying on a very limited medium of communication.
Hmm.
When pre-technology, we are communicating with people, and for some of us still in situations, when you're face to face in 3D reality, um, you're not just hearing words, which in part can be represented in a text, yes, but you're also getting modulation of our voice, which in some of the data we have is 300% more impactful in communication than the actual words. And if you think about it, the way people speak the same words makes a total difference on the impact it makes on others. So again, we lose out that part.
Hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I repeat, like fundamentally, we're literally losing the ability to think for ourselves. It's almost as if to our whole society, our culture broadly, and again, I'm speaking of the world right now largely, because we are on that level sort of interconnected everywhere. And many people are unfortunately addicted to this as well. We're going into a space, strangely enough, where although we created computers and the related technologies to make life easier and better for us, the result I see is we're dehumanizing ourselves. We're making ourselves more machine-like to have to think that way. So you record the data, you input the data the way the system requires you to.
Hmm.
Even, calling major companies these days for customer service, some issue. As you know, you go through usually all these voice prompts, wasting your
Yeah.
time, frustrating you. And sometimes even when you get, the option you're seeking, it's a bot. It's not a human being.
Yeah.
And
It's
we're
really
we're
not.
doing this to ourselves. When you have these automatic checkouts, on the one hand, for a company, less staffing costs, and some people may like to have the power to check out themselves. But increasingly, everyone's being forced to do it that way. Our ATMs, many banks are closing, and we used to have a relationship sometimes with the people who worked in those stores and the people who worked in those banks. A little
Yeah.
bit, somewhat.
Yeah.
And we're losing all of that.
That's true. You brought up a lot of valid points, and I'm glad you did because I've had many guests on my show, and I don't think anybody has really put it the way that you did. And I'm so glad that you did because you
Thank you.
truly do put it in a perspective where we have really lost the way that our thought processes have been. It's no longer evolving in the direction that we thought that we would evolve
No,
as humans in this day and age. We thought we would be more far along, but we have been so dependent and reliant, like you said, and has become so addictive. And it's just crazy to think that a lot of the suffering that we are creating and a lot of the problems that we have is because of our own actions in relying on certain things or that on technology to do for us what we could already do for ourselves and what we can already acknowledge for ourselves. But because we, like you said, we're turning into these robots, like we're supposed to act a certain way,
yeah,
perform a certain way, be a certain way, do certain things, and it's like, no, we're humans.
yeah.
We are different. That's the beauty thing about being humans, is that we are different. I also want to touch back because I don't want to lose this thought, is when you said that the US is supposed to be representing unity. Oh my goodness. You are absolutely right. And we are not right now. We are not united. We are literally tearing each other apart. And it's so crazy because everybody outside of the US is seeing this
That's
and
right.
they're like, if this
I'm up here in
happens to
Canada,
this
and
time,
yes, yeah,
and it's like if this happens to the United States, that's supposed to resemble un, united, literally in the name, and they can't even actually unite together for something so common as a presidency. Then where is this country going to go, and what does that mean for the rest of the world? So I love how it also you say it affects the whole world because you can see the Black Lives Movement, you can see the LGBTQ community movement going across the world in
yeah,
ways that you would never expect where they would be. I watch news and I'm like, this is happening over there. This is affecting. I speak with people from all over the world, and I'm like, you acknowledge this. You understand this level of perception that people act like they are blinded from this. So I guess it leads to my question: why do people choose to be blind, and why do people choose to or not or care too much? Like, I mean, in your perspective as your psychiatry background, where
well,
would that fall for you?
partly come back to you saying, like, choosing to be blind. I do think there are people who choose to be in denial. It's just too much. For
Yeah,
example,
that's a good
many,
point.
many people these days intentionally are not listening to the news anymore. They may get social media feeds, which is
Yeah,
unfortunately biased, but they don't listen to the news
yeah.
anymore and they don't read newspapers anymore. So that's like a
Mm,
personal thing that they're doing. And of course, as less people read newspapers, there's less ability of newspapers to exist or to hire good
yeah,
staff and write, really good, challenging, provocative articles. So that's one part of it. Again, the defense mechanism in the sense psychiatrically is just too much of being in denial. But the other aspect of me, like I said earlier, is the technology was designed to be addictive.
yeah.
Like
That's
if somebody slipped a narcotic into someone's food a couple of times, some of those people would become addicted, whether they wanted to or not.
mhm.
It's like playing with fire. Um,
That's
it's
true.
craziness.
It
To,
is.
to
It
come
is.
back to some, things that maybe help to guide others that I've discovered too, which I describe in my book. This is one tool that I teach my psychiatric patients to deal with life these days. I call it the inner GPS. And I explain to them like a GPS in a car, which helps you find the best route. And sometimes live traffic updates, so you know exactly which is the better route, which is the clearer
Yeah.
route to proceed in. I tell them, fortunately, we're all born with a factory installed inner GPS. However, it's installed. It's not activated. To activate it, you have to choose to think through your choices and to act or not act in such a way that you be proud of yourself, irrespective of other people's encouragement or discouragement. But primarily, you're thinking it through for yourself and always. And there always are choices. We don't always realize there are choices. I love the quotation from Viktor Frankl. When he was in the concentration camp, he had this awareness that the only thing that the brutal prison guards could control was his imagination. And he imagined a future somehow where he'd be free, where he not only would be free, he would be honored around the world for what he had discovered, which he wrote up in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. But there's one quotation in that book which is powerful, which I wanted to share with you and your audience, and that is, between stimulus and response, between what happens and our reaction, there is a space. And in that space is our freedom to choose. And I repeat, there are always choices if you choose to be aware and honor them by thinking them through and choosing at the time what you think is the best choice that you would not regret subsequently, given the information and everything you know at that point in the situation broadly. So that's one tool I would strongly recommend people to work with, the inner GPS. Think things through whenever there's a potential important decision, and there's always choices in them. Not always so visible, not always easy, but there's still choices.
That's a valid point because it goes back to earlier when you were describing your book and how you were stating how, yes, there's a surface level of living, but then once you go deeper and you go inside and you really are in tune with what's going on inside you, it really does become a GPS. Like I've gotten in tune with my own, and man, the times that it has guided me and protected me and held me through life makes me realize doubt comes in only to keep you away from listening. So when doubt comes, that just proves you need to step on courage, step on that confidence and just go forward, because just having that doubt, that's still a choice, like you said, because you have that moment to choose. We all have that moment to choose. Even if you think you don't have that choice, you still make a choice either way. That's the reason why people are so how you say gun-ho or about power and taking somebody away. It's making them feel like they don't have power. What is your opinions on that? Because that is a real big thing.
Well, I mean, broadly, I think sadly we're living in a time of great exploitation on all levels right now in so many
That
different
is the
parts of the world.
truth.
But
Yeah,
to come back to some of the science that I share in my book, which may be helpful for others to know at this point, and the issue again that people have forgotten how to think. We believe, most of us, and Western medical science seems to also encourage us to believe such, that our mind, our consciousness is produced by the physical brain in our head. And I go into this very deeply in my book. And this may sound, extremely hard to believe, but it's very well documented and no one disagrees with it. There's absolutely no proof that the physical brain in our head causes consciousness. None. Zero. All we have are correlations. Something happens to the brain, we may have a different experience, or we can't move our body the same way. But similarly, if you had a radio and you have, let's say, a young child and pour some fluid over the radio, it won't work perhaps at all or as well. It doesn't mean the signal's gone. Somebody else who has a radio tunes into the same station would hear it clearly. So we think our brain is almost more like a receiver, a selective receiver. But more importantly, as we dive even deeper, the belief that many people have that the head brain are produced, the conscious and the mind, and that it's the brain, even that's wrong physically. Humans, as we now know, have at least 3 physical brains, all of us. So there's the head brain in our skull, there's the heart brain, and there's what we call the microbiome, which is the bacteria in our intestines. And strangely enough, those trillions of bacteria have more DNA genetically than we do in our human body. Those bacteria are able to secrete neurohormones that directly affect brain function. For example, Popular medication for many people these days in psychiatry for anxiety and depression are variations of what are called SSRIs, selective
Okay.
uh, reuptake inhibitors. So we're like start with Prozac, and there's so many different ones right now. And they work with serotonin levels supposedly in the brain, but 90% of serotonin is produced in the bacteria in our gut. So you just very bad science. But let me come back to the heart. This is the important part now, I think, in our limited time. The heart is a brain. The heart has neurons. It has brain cells. The heart has its own memory system. The heart has more nerves going up to control the brain function in the head than the head brain can control the heart. There is evidence too to suggest the heart is a portal to the other realm. And it's a portal, if you like, for intuitive knowledge. And when we sense people, have a warm-hearted manner, there's a different vibe. We know that with our current technology, and I imagine with later technology, we could even go do this more so, but right now, we can measure an electromagnetic field around the human body from the heart, at least 6 feet out. So it means when you're getting together with people, you literally feel their vibes, good or bad. And again, you can't get this on technology the same way. So it's really important to be guided more by your heart. And related to that, the notion of the golden rule, the opposite of the divisiveness and hostilities we have right now. Treat others as you would want them to treat you. And the importance of love. Love connects us, whether we're in the electromagnetic field or not. It connects us. Hate divides us.
Yeah.
Hate and anger. And I would also, encourage people to realize when you hear people speaking, advocating politically or otherwise for some major change or for people to follow them, if they're mostly speaking out of anger and hatred, that's not spiritual. It's
Yeah.
not true. It's not for you, not for you, the people. It's for them at your expense. You want people who communicate from love, whose value is based on love. Love is connection. Even in the Bible, it says God is love.
Yeah. I really like that. I'm so glad I had this conversation with you, Howard, because man, that makes so much sense that you talked about how the heart is like brain. And despite what people wanna imagine it not that, oh, it's just a heart, it just beats blood and it has to do more than that.
Yeah.
That's the reason why people can die from sorrow. Not because of the
Yes.
brain, but because of our heart brain.
Yes.
That makes so much
That's right.
sense. Because my grandmother, she died because her son died. And she was so heartbroken that she
Heartbroken.
couldn't live
Yeah.
without it. And there's so many people that can relate. You see it in animals
Yeah. It's a real medical thing. Yes.
exactly like you can, if you really think about it and take a second to think about it, you can relate scenarios to add it up to make it sense. And that's the reason why I think AI has such a problem connecting or be having that humanistic actual level is because they are not thinking from the heart. They're thinking just from the mind and they think the mind is just logical and just intellectual. But like the heart has so much. And when you were talking about how you could feel vibes 6 feet away. I mean, that's the reason why when I walk into a room, you can feel the difference when it happens, or you can feel the vibe according to certain
Yeah.
people. And people don't realize where this is coming from, and they think science is not a part of it, or they don't, or they think it's just spiritual, and they don't realize that everything is kind of intertangled together. There's really no separation. There's only separation when people want to have that separation, and they can't comprehend in their mind that this is all entangled. You know what I mean? We're truly all entangled. And oh my
And,
goodness, that's
and, and coming back to, I hope, practical applications of this teaching of these wisdoms, which I just discuss, I think, more scientifically in my book, obviously. We know that when people are feeling stressed, and many of us are these days, and this is counterintuitive in some ways, one major way of reducing our personal stress is to become more aware and more considerate of the needs of others. We call that altruism. The founder of the whole concept of stress physiologically in medicine was Hans Selye. And near the end of his life, after all of his experiments, he wrote a number of books as well. He said, one of the very best, if not the best way for us humans to reduce our stress was to become more altruistic. He called it the altruistic ego. Now, again, it seems counterintuitive a bit because, like, if you're overwhelmed, how's it going to help you to now take on the issues of someone else? Howard, I can explain it scientifically. When you switch your focus from your pain, your suffering, the unfairness that you're victimized by, and you focus on something you still could be aware of if you look out, beyond yourself, and someone else in need that you really could help despite what you're dealing with,
Yeah.
it diverts blood flow literally from the amygdala, which is the stress part of our brain, to the upper prefrontal cortex of our brain, which is our thinking brain. So first of all, it changes our state. It's less emotional for us subjectively in terms of our discomfort, and we're thinking more clearly. And when we help someone else, sometimes, of course, that's reciprocated, which is not our level of benefit. But coming back to the medical physiology here, we know that when people are like that, when you do something more altruistic, help someone else, your stress hormones, your adrenaline, your cortisol goes down.
Oh.
So it's not just saying, heed the wisdom of the golden rule because it's an ancient, biblical book and it's all over the world. How can you dispute it? We can say it in terms of science as well now.
Yeah. That's the beauty of it. That is a beauty of people who say that they only rely on science and like, okay, well, you want science, here's your science. Now go ahead and do it now. Are you going to do it? Really? You know what I mean? That's the choice. It comes back to the choice. You have the power of choice to choose to think differently, choose to act
Mm.
differently, choose to be more intentional with your actions and your way of living. You know what I mean? And I think that's one thing that I hope that people can really get out of this conversation is to really shift it so that they can really start thinking about their actions, their well-being, their frame of mind and how they see the world. And just ask that simple question like, how am I really seeing the world? And how is it really affecting me the way that I see the world? People don't take those little moments to just have that reflection.
No.
But if anybody wants to know more about Howard, I do have his photo on my website with access to his website so you can get more of this information in you and you have access to his books and so many great things to think about on his website. I'm telling you, if you're already here thinking, continue on thinking with Howard because he won't let you down. So, just really start wrapping up the show. What could be some lasting words of wisdom that we can live off with? I mean, let's be honest, you already gave us so many great points and tips. This whole entire conversation is going to keep me thinking the rest of the day. But what can be some lasting words?
2 words: think and connect.
Mm, think and connect. Yes, that connection part. Oh, you're absolutely right. Can't forget to think. And then you got to connect. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. With that being said, always, always, always keep thinking, y'all. Bye.